In this show, is Apple Logic Pro broken on M1 MacBook Pros? Is Apple really planning to switch from Mini LED to OLED already? And vapour chamber cooling coming to the iPhone 14 Pro. I'm Mike Dave and I simplify Apple so that everything just works for you. And if you want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours every weekday at 1300 UTC, like the video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. And let's get straight into our first story. This comes to us from Andre Louis, who's a long-time subscriber to the channel, but he has pointed out some articles on Apple's support website. This is discussions.apple.com. Bontempi, who is one of the users on there, writes, terrible performance on the M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro. Hi, am I the only one getting random CPU spikes, random MIDI notes hanging, random crackles turning into feedback, and random crashes in the latest Logic Pro with M1 in native mode? I only use native M1 plugins, yet it feels really buggy, something I've never experienced before on any machine. This is a bit of an issue for me because I don't personally use Logic. It's not a program that I'm in every day. I use GarageBand to make the music that comes on this show. However, Andre is a musician, a very good musician, and uses Logic all the time, and I'm guessing that this has caused problems for him as well. And it's not a limited problem. Putting myself in the shoes of someone who is using this all day long, it would be like Final Cut for me, randomly hanging and crashing all the time. And here's the thing, it's not an isolated incident. There are 5 pages of these comments on Apple's discussion portal. This is clearly not an isolated issue or some little edge case. Honestly, it's quite a concern. And these comments seem to have started in December, so it's a recent thing as well. It's not something that seems to have been resolved, so a bit of an issue. If we're not at a point where Apple's own first-party Pro software isn't running well on Apple's own first-party flagship Mac hardware, we are in a problem situation. I have an idea that may vaguely redeem Apple, which we'll come to, but it's not really consolation for the people that have work to do like today. And also, I'm an Apple apologist in general. I tend to look for the good in whatever the company does, and I try to see why they're doing what they're doing in a positive light in general. I'm a positive person. I always try to steer clear of assuming the worst and assume that anything is done for negative reasons, regardless of the situation. I never assign malice to something that can be explained by stupidity, but this seems like a massive drop of the ball on Apple's part. Is there some reason that Apple hasn't paid attention to this? I don't know, but my hope is that it's because Apple is working super hard behind the scenes on a massive rebuild of both Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro that will finally allow them to run on Apple Silicon, not just on the Mac, but for the first time on the iPad. Now, as far as I know, iMovie and GarageBand are based on Final Cut and Logic, but with basically features removed. But at their hearts, they're using the same or at least very similar code behind the scenes. So, if Apple isn't fixing this instantly as they should, at least if they're about to come to the iPad and get a massive update on the Mac to go along with it, then great. But for the people that have already paid for Apple's professional suite, it's probably not super comforting being told that they won't be able to effectively work until then. Not a great look. Now, if you're a Logic user, and I know we have quite a few in the audience, let me know down in the comments. How is this working out for you? Are you having issues with specific plugins, or is it with the base code, which is even more worrying? Thankfully, Final Cut's not dying on me yet, so let's keep it that way, Apple. Next up, we have a question from James Apple with iCave Answers. If you want to get a question answered, by the way, hashtag iCave Answers down in the comment section with your question, so I know you would like me to address it on the show. So James Apple asks, are you buying this bull with OLED coming to the Mac and iPads after they've just done mini LED displays on iPad Pros and Macs? So this is a tricky one. It's not kind of the way that people are looking at it. It's a little bit different, and Rennie Ritchie has just done a massive explainer video on this, so I'm not going to go into huge detail, but do check out Rennie's video. It's got D1 in the thumbnail, as if it's like the new display technology, D1 chips. But essentially, Mini LED works for bigger display panels right now far better than OLED does. OLED in TVs tends to be white OLEDs, which then get filtered in the same way that kind of LCD does, as far as I understand it. The reason that Apple uses OLED already in things like the Apple Watch and in things like the iPhones is because on the smaller displays they work quite well. Apple has a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that actually kind of maintains these displays and makes sure that they don't degrade unevenly, because that's one of the big problems with OLED, is that if you've got persistent stuff on the displays, the OLED starts to break down in those places, and you get darker spots or different colours not working as well. So you'll get persistent images. The reason that Mini LED has worked so well is because on a larger display panel they're using an existing technology that works very well. It does have that slight blooming effect, but you do still get very good blacks. Not as good as OLED, but also OLED struggles with the peak brightnesses that Mini LED doesn't. So there's a lot of trade-offs here. Now the chances are that OLED, if it does come to the iPads, will be for lower end products. So a mid-tier kind of OLED might come to the iPad Air, for example, giving you the better blacks, giving you good colour response, but not being as bright as the iPads Pro. And that could be the same that comes to the MacBooks, but not necessarily the MacBooks Pro. I think all of this is kind of what's the best option that we have right now until we get to micro LED, which is kind of the ultimate, I think, kind of works. It's all the best points of OLED and all of the best points of Mini LED in terms of lifespan and things like that. So I think that's the end game, is that we get to micro LED. But for now, I think Apple is just filling in the gaps and kind of letting them compete and fight it out. And Evan Rogers asks, iCave answers, will Apple put vapor chambers into the iPhone 14 Pro models, or will they save it for the in-house modem in a year or two? And yeah, we've definitely seen some information about Apple potentially using vapor chambers in order to help with cooling on the chips in the Pro models. I think this is probably more for the persistent stuff that you would do more likely on a Pro iPhone, things like video rendering, things like converting video files from one to another. Probably with the ProRes stuff, there's going to be situations where you need to use those at their peak for a little bit longer than you probably would do in most cases. So that's why it wouldn't necessarily be as useful for the regular iPhone models, and that would be quite a nice differentiator as well in terms of the cooling between the 14 Pro and the 14 Nothings. Will it happen? I'm not 100% sure. Vapor chambers, by the way, kind of like an enhanced heat pipe, I guess. It's for dissipating heat, being able to move that away from the SoC for anyone that's not aware what the vapor chambers are. I'm not 100% clear on it because I'm not a PC builder, I'm not into water cooling, all that kind of stuff, which I think is kind of where this stuff comes from. But would it come in the iPhone 14? I would hope so. I think that would be an interesting thing, something cool that Apple can talk about. But what will Apple brand vapor chambers as? I'm sure they will have their own special name, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. What will Apple brand the vapor chamber as? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you to all of our Patreons over here. If you want to join them, iCaveDave.com/Patreon, and you can be a supporter of the show. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.